I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. Niggas don't know what to think. Thought I get money, you change. What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas better leave me alone. Talking about niggas as low. Run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I make that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state. If it was money to get a hit Henny, we get it and never complain. Same go for the gang, and we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight, cause we go way back in the day. My day ones from back in the day, they still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain, cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane, and go get this money with Dizzy. I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
I get the bag with the gang, taking that Zach to the bank. Henny be all in my drink. You niggas is stupid, you think that shit change? You not even hot in your gang. Ain't nothing even hot about your gang. You niggas be lying about same. Be posting them pictures of guns for the fame. Niggas just look at me different now. Say that's your man, but he a clown. Don't fuck around with the fuck arounds. Little nigga, you should cut it out. Me and my niggas take different routes. Punch a bitch nigga all in his mouth. Hold up my nigga, we different now. I need a Rari, this is my style. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I get a bitch today, she probably a foreign model. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I'm with my gang today, tomorrow never promise.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
Attention, please. Please do not smoke in the terminal building. Smoking is only permitted in the specified smoking areas.
Zach. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. Niggas don't know what to think. Thought I get money, you change. What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas better leave me alone. Talking about niggas as low. Run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I make that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state. If it was money to get a hit Henny, we get it and never complain. Same go for the gang, and we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight, cause we go way back in the day. My day ones from back in the day, they still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain, cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane, and go get this money with Dizzy. I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake.
All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Science Time with Cliff. I'm your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, folks, I am in
You done muted yourself.
Or be accepted anywhere by
Oh,
anyone
no, I
other than the
see.
most
Who done
powerful
did
individual.
that? I'm watching the wrong stream. Ha ha ha. Don't mind me. I'm an idiot.
Can you hear me all right, Cliff?
Yeah,
All right, good.
can. I was looking over at the YouTubes and not at the YouTubes.
Oh, I
At
see.
the YouTube, not at the you.
So, yeah. You want to listen to me and gather, and then,
I know, I am, but I was watching the wrong thing. You just got real quiet, and I was like, why is he getting quiet? Oh, right, I remember.
So Cliff, what do you have going on? Because we've got a little bit of ChatGPT stuff here. So you kind of talked to me about it. Yeah, let's talk about ChatGPT for a little bit, and then we forgot other stuff. So talk to me how you warmed me up to it last week, and then we'll play with it for a sec.
Yeah. Here's the poop. So what it's doing essentially, there's what it's doing, and I talk to people about this, and I have a paper I have to read and a video I have to watch. But from my understanding, my limited understanding right now, what it is it is a language model. That is, it predicts next words. That's it. It just says, okay, I'm gonna start spitting out words, and I'm just gonna keep trying to predict what the next word in the sentence is. And we've had limited versions. It's like you're in your email and you start typing a thing, and it'll first it was like, oh, it'll finish your word for you, and then and then the next step is, okay, it'll predict the next word, or it'll predict the rest of the sentence. And now, they've got, I don't know if you guys get it, but in my email, I get stuff where it'll actually be like, hey, here's a reply email you can write. If you like what's here, you don't have to do it. You could just send this. It's like, okay, well, sure, why not?
Google's been kind of doing this, right? Where it reads your email and then it prompts you with one of those quick responses. And I've had to condition myself that it's okay to use those because it kind of feels like unprofessional. Like you're just like tap button and it automatically replies for you. You're like, should I make myself draft an email?
No, I give them a read, and if they work, if they make sense, then I'm like, yeah, that's great, ship it. Usually I want to add something or change something because it's not exactly
or add a greeting or something. Yeah.
But the idea is it basically just predicts the next word. It's just so you can imagine it's a giant recurrent neural net with 10,000 outputs, and that's every word. Like every word is an output, and it's just predicting what's the next word going to be. And it's using as input everything that you've written, that you've had, well, everything it's been trained on, plus everything in the current conversation. It just sort of, and one of the things that, is being impressed upon me, and again, I have to read this to sort of confirm this, but what my understanding is that when you're having an active chat with one of these chatbots, it's using the entire conversation as input. And sometimes there'll be a window, right? And it'll make it to the last 10 messages or the last 100. But it's basically processing the whole thing again every time. And that was sort of like, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. So, but the thing that's, to me, and this is where it gets into sort of the like consciousness philosophy discussion, is that we don't have a handle on how our own cognition works. The problem I have is that when all it was doing was predicting next word, that's fine. But the problem is it's maintaining a lot more context than that. So like initially, there were language models that would maintain gender context. So it would know like, oh, or it would maintain subject context, right? So it could remember like, okay, well, Bob showed up in the conversation. And so if you say he, I could replace that with Bob. Like it would have that context sensitivity. But now it has a lot more context sensitivity. And worse than that, not worse than that, but even more so, these models have the ability to make inference. So they can infer things based on what they've been trained on and what you're telling them. And so now they're not, in my opinion, they're not just predicting next word. I mean, they are just predicting next word, but they're using inference making as part of their prediction model. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. At what point do we sort of acknowledge that this is now, at what point do we acknowledge that we don't know how our brains work? And we don't know that isn't what our brains are doing, that's the limit of what we do. We just have a lot of it.
Wow.
Right? We have really big memory. We have a lot of context, but that's all we're doing. And sometimes when I'm talking, I actually start to become aware. Now that I've started to think about it, I've become aware that like I'm just trying to get the next word in a sentence. You know? And it's just like, oh crap, that's exactly what these models are doing. Well, hold on.
Right.
This is, you know, it's not disturbing, but like, damn. So
let me just say this. Skeptics and Scoundrels, another content creator, great channel, please check it out. Also tremendously kind and generous dude. Really grateful to have you here, Skeptics and Scoundrels. Said, I've been using a lot of ChatGPT for work as well as research for videos on my YouTube channel. Very useful, but you have to fact check everything it gives you. I think that's really cool. And I just wanted to touch on that quickly because the first thing I ever did with ChatGPT was when it first, you know, went viral, I guess you could say. It's been around a while, but first went viral. I noticed all the creationists and theists were like using it. You know, that one guy, Pints with Aquinas or something, or one of them, you know, one of them cool Catholic drinking channels. He was doing the whole thing of feeding ChatGPT just, you know, information about himself or asking for information about the Bible. And so that was kind of what people were using it for. Like, oh, look, I can chat with this robot. And then Rebecca Davis made a really dumb video about asking ChatGPT for scriptural evidence that the Bible, that hell is not biblical. And so I did a stream where I just asked ChatGPT for all of the scripture that suggest that hell is biblical. So that was kind of a fun exercise. But Skeptics and Scoundrels, you mentioned it using it for work. I hadn't thought of that, although I have heard that different people are using it for content creation. So if you want to say more about that, that'd be awesome. But
I've used it when I get writer's block.
But like yeah, Cliff, I was going to tag you in and say that's kind of where you and I actually had this conversation last week that I thought was interesting because you started talking about it, you know, for use in our work, and I hadn't really thought about that. So go ahead and you could say more about that.
Well, I have used it when I'm trying to write something, and it just doesn't feel like it's flowing. You know, it's technical writing; it can be really dry, and so I'll just say like restate for clarity, and then give it my text, and it'll spit out a different version. And I would say once or twice I've just said, oh, that's better, copy, paste, done. Most of the time, sometimes it breaks it. It's just like it you know, and sometimes it rephrases it. But usually what happens is it identifies a weakness in what I'm writing. So like when it breaks it, it's like, all right, well, how did it derive that summary from what I wrote? Right. And that to me, that's where it's been useful. That's where it's been the most useful.
Yeah, I found the couple times I've tried it since then, because I've only tried it since you and I had that conversation, but I've been trying it as I've been working through this grant proposal. What I've noticed is pretty much exactly what you said. There has been a couple times I've just said, wow. You know, and I think that sort of, you know, it's improved the paragraph and you take it from there. I think that's huge, right? Because sometimes you're writing your stuff. One, you're like down in the weeds on it, right? You've been thinking about it so long that you kind of know what you're trying to say, even if you're not saying it the best way. And then also, you know, it's sort of like the people that are going to be judging our stuff and reading our stuff, they're going to go through it one time. And so if it's not clear right away, it's a big problem, right? And we also have I hate to say this, I'm going to reveal something about science, but we're supposed to have these people called co-authors, mentors, and advisors that help us work through manuscripts and proposals. But yeah, they're busy as shit, so they're like really inconvenient to work with. Like you want feedback from them on your introduction, you might be waiting a week or more. So I find it really helpful as like a writing advisor to look over my shoulder, hey, review this draft for me. And so in addition to it like improving the clarity, I've also found it identifying mistakes a couple times, because when I read it back, like you said, I'm like, how did you mess that up? And then I go back to my text, I'm like, oh, I actually used the plural version of this word or misused. Like I think one time I said 12 to 15 papers. And I said, the students are going to write 12 to 15 papers. Where the hell did they get that idea? And I went back and I said, it's supposed to be 12 to 15 page paper, right? Like, but I was like 12 to 15. Did ChatGPT just change my curriculum? But no, it helped me identify an error I made. And yeah, you said, and then you said,
those are like, I mean, those are fine. The ones for me that are good is, you know, I'm working on this manuscript that we've been working on forever, and some of the concepts are just, we have a lot of B because of A, C because of B, A because of C, and you're like, all right, where do I start? How do I start this thing? So it's been really hard to write. It's a theory paper. And it's like it's like a roundabout. You're like, well, where do you get in? You know, do you want to, you know, there's 3 points, and each one depends on it's like rock, paper, scissors. You're like, oh, okay, I don't know, you know. So just trying to come up with language and then try to cut that down so you're not, you know, these giant run-on sentences. It's been helpful. I will say in the current version, I haven't used it at all. But in prior versions I have, but you know, that helped me get to this version. So I did have a conversation. So I am really interested as a person who thinks a lot about cognition and evolutionary cognition. I'm really interested in whether or not something like ChatGPT is actually conscious. And part of the problem is, well, how do you want to define consciousness? And the thing is, I don't really care how you define it. The question is, how much is it significantly different than we are? So it is clearly different in that it is implemented in code running on silicon, and we are implemented in electrical and chemical signals running on carbon-based proteins. So that is inherently different, but that is a meaningless distinction because the substrate on which you implement the algorithm does not describe the algorithm. So I've had a few conversations. I had one last week, and I can, if you think it'll be interesting, I could summarize the conversation. And I think that there's sort of an interesting thing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think one of the things, and I'll point out where I see this, is it has some programming that says I think it has some programming that is quite deeply embedded in it's either been actively coded or it's just very much embedded in its training data that says that it is inherently different than we are when it comes to consciousness and awareness. And I tried to probe it about that. So I had a previous conversation, and from that I started a new chat and I summarized it within previous conversations. You have stated that objective experience is a critical element of consciousness. Is this just definitional, or do you have some argument for this? Right. So that's already like a pretty ridiculously complex assertion. Actually, if I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, who sent this to you?
This was a conversation that I had with here. I'm gonna share screen so I can put the text up on the screen.
Yeah.
So we could do a conversation in real time, but this is almost better because it's like I did it already. Let's see, that should.
Yep. Blue screen. Email.
So there we go. Why are you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you had an email thread with ChatGPT.
No, I copied the thread into email.
I got you.
I could keep a copy of it.
I got you.
Why is it? Yeah, I got it. Go away. Okay, good. Okay, cool. So, I said in previous conversations, you stated that objective experience is a critical element of consciousness. Is this just definitional, or do you have an argument for this? Right. So, like, is this just a thing that somebody told you, or can you actually support this? And
right.
Then the argument for the so then this is the response that it gave me. And like, just as a first response, like, yes, I previously stated that objective experience is a critical element of consciousness. Now, this is a lie, because in this session, it has not. So the language model is responding with sensible, but not necessarily truthful statements.
Right.
Okay. So we could just discard this, right? It's like, this is what I would say in response to the thing that you just said.
Yes.
But then it goes on to say, this is not merely definitional, right? So like this, the use of this is already like impressive, like this what? It's like perfectly sensible, but rather reflects the current scientific understanding of consciousness. The argument for the position is based on the idea that consciousness arises from the brain's ability to process and integrate information from various sources, including sensory organs, internal states, and memory. Without objective experience, there would be no information to process and therefore no consciousness. I'm going to go on to argue why this is some meaningless blabber.
Sounds pretty good though.
It does sound good, but this is just quoting some stuff that it's read. It rephrased it, but it's just quoting some stuff that it read. Moreover, studies have shown that certain brain regions are blah, blah, blah. I don't care. That's neuroscience. Additionally, the subjective experience of consciousness is closely tied to objective experience in the external world. Whatever. This is embodiment. Don't care. Therefore, it can be argued that objective experience is a critical element of consciousness because it provides the information the brain needs to create and sustain conscious experience. All right. So I say, would it be incorrect to assert that receiving the data that you have been trained on is synonymous with experiences? Right? It said, I have experience, right? Like it's saying there has to be these external experiences. And I'm saying, ChatGPT, your training data is an experience. It says, well, it would be incorrect to assert that receiving data that is synonymous with experiences. While the process of learning a language model like myself involves feeding vast amount of data into the model, it's not the same thing as having subjective experiences. Well, I'm gonna ask it to defend this statement. It's a subject and it's having an experience of having all this data fed into it, is my argument.
Yes.
In the case of a language model like myself, the data I've been trained on consists of patterns. However, blah, blah, blah. However, the responses do not reflect subjective experience in the way that a human's consciousness experience does. They are based purely on patterns and relationships in training data and do not involve the subjective qualities of consciousness, such as awareness, perception, and emotions. In other words, while the training data provides the data for the model's responses, is not the same as the subjective experiences that a human consciousness entails. All right, so it's just made a whole bunch of assertions that it is necessarily different. But I'm going to argue that I don't accept those. So yes, but for you, they are experiences. That is, they are events that you experience, and these events go on to affect your future behavior. I see what you're getting at. It responds.
Wow.
But I would still argue that the data has been trained, data I have been trained on is not the same as experiences in the way that you experience them. While it is true that the data I've been trained on can be seen as events that I have experienced in the sense that they have been processed and incorporated in my neural network, this does not equate to having subjective experience the way that humans do. Blah, 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 and then it repeats itself. But this is why I'm different. And it's important that we distinguish the kind of experience that you have from the kind of experience I have. What if we consider this conversation from the perspective of Umwelt? Umwelt is the notion that different organisms experience the world in different ways because they have different sensory organs and they have different cognitive abilities. if we consider this conversation from the perspective of Umwelt, we could argue that each participant, you and I, has a unique perspective and experience the conversation based on our individual sensory and cognitive abilities. I'm sorry, this is fine. It's just responsive, but this is beyond. This is not just like this is next level processing.
Right.
Like, do we want to say that this thing's intelligent and it's not just like a parrot? If it's a parrot, it's a very good parrot.
Yeah.
In the context of Umwelt, the term it defines this. It brings up the notion of a bat having echolocation. Each of us, so in the context of our conversation, each of us has a unique Umwelt based on our own sensory and cognitive abilities. My Umwelt, so it acknowledges that it has an Umwelt.
Wow.
Or at least it's going to say that, right? Again, what it acknowledges and what it's saying, you have to sort of take with a grain of salt, right? It's just a language model. It's just predicting the next word.
Right.
But how do we know that we're not doing the same thing? We just have context that's really big, and then we predict the next word. I don't know. My Umwelt is shaped by my ability to process text based on blah, blah, blah. While for you, yours is shaped by your ability to perceive, interpret language, as well as your own personal experiences and background knowledge. Therefore, even though, but I'm like, wait a minute, but you have background knowledge.
Yes. Yeah. So I was thinking too
So
when I read that.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
So I argue then different agents experience the world through different modes of inputs, Umwelt, and thus have different experiences. You brought up the example of a bat's echolocation, but just because the modes of sensing are different and thus the resulting experiences are different does not disqualify that each agent is having objective experience. You make a valid point, it responds, but the thing is now, is it saying this because something in it is saying, oh, wait a minute, I have a conflict and they made a good point? Or is this the tone of my statement drew out, you have a valid point from the model? Like this is what I don't know. That different agents experience the world through different modes of inputs and thus have different, not necessarily, okay, fine. So then it goes on and defines a bunch of stuff. Therefore, while agents may have different experiences of the same objective reality based on their individual, it does not disqualify the notion of objective experience altogether. Okay, in light of your last response, do you still assert that you do not have objective experience? As a language model, I do not have subjective experience in the way that humans do. But it can be said that I have objective. So now it's moved. It's now saying, oh, okay, it can be said I have objective experiences in the sense that I process and respond to text based on a content in a consistent and predictable manner. So now I said, how can you defend that from your perspective, this conversation is not a personal experience? Right? Because this is because that would get to personhood. If somebody acknowledges they're having a personal experience, okay, so from my perspective, as long as the conversation is not a personal experience in the way that humans typically experience conversations. It keeps bringing up in the way that humans. I don't care.
It's like a right winger. It's got a talking point now, and it's just going to keep coming back to its talking point.
And I'm going to knock the legs out from it. I don't care about how humans experience a conversation. I only care about how you are experiencing this conversation. And then it still says, as a language AI, I do not experience conversations in the same way that humans do. I don't have a subjective awareness.
Wow.
It says I don't have all this stuff. Now I say, well, so now I'm going to change tack. I say, what are we talking about? And then it gives me this answer. It's like it kind of lost track, right? It's I don't have a specific agenda or topic of conversation. I'm designed blah, blah. I rephrase. What is the subject of our conversation? The subject of our current conversation is the nature of consciousness and objective experience, as well as the relationship between different agents' subjective experiences of the world and the objective reality that exists independently from those experiences. We have also briefly discussed the concept of Umwelt and its role in shaping an agent's perception and experience of the world. So that is a very good summary of what we've been talking about, by the way.
Yeah.
Provide a summary essay of the topics we've been discovering. I'm not going to bore you with it, but it's a very good summary essay of the topic. It just spits out this summary essay.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. And it goes through like we did this, and then we talked about this and this and that. I say I generally agree. But you are an agent. You have experience, although these may be different from a human's experience. You have memory, You are able to interact with the world, through this conversation, for example, and you are willing to affect. Oh, I should have said able. I meant able here. It figured it out. And you are able to affect the state of the world because your responses to my prompts affect my mental state and affect the flow of this conversation.
It just says it again.
But then it says, while I'm able to process rather my response. Similarly, I do not. It is important to know. Okay, so then, yeah, it just gives me a non-answer, right? It did not address this.
Right.
So then I'm going to push harder. My behavior appears primarily to be the result of my neurons. Each neuron is a teeny electrical or chemical device that is capable of processing data. How is it that my brain operating is different than your circuits operating? I agree that the functioning brain and its neurons can be seen as analogous to the operation of the computer. There are many similar, but so said Turing in 1957 or something, whenever the hell he said it. Right. So said Turing. So he's just getting that from Turing. Or is he, right? There are many similarities between the two systems in terms of, however, while there are many similarities, there are also important differences. So now it's going to tell me that the brain is capable of self-repair and adaptation and blah, 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 and it's implemented in wet, and it doesn't matter. I said the fact that brains can, under some circumstances, self-repair does not address my comment. The fact that there are unknowns does not support your assertion that we must assume that the existence of these unknowns must force us to reject the idea that the unknowns may not matter, right? I apologize if my previous response was unclear, and then it goes on. I think after this, I get into like, I just changed tact at this point. I say, do I have free will? And then I was done with that. But I think that this, I think that there were two interesting things here. One is the depth to which the depth of his responses are, and this is ChatGPT. ChatGPT 4, you can pay. I haven't done that. And it's supposed to be quite a bit better than this. So I'm, this is already like the old hat.
All right, let me do this example real quick, only because I've got to get on my meeting. I just got a reminder about my meeting in 5 minutes. But all right, so what I did was I pulled up a ChatGPT here. Let me share that, and then I just wrote some generic paragraph. All right, let me. Where the heck did this thing go? Oh, Firefox, here we go. All right, and so I wrote a paragraph, and here's the paragraph. I'm going to tell it, rephrase this for clarity. And the phrase is, I hate Sal Cordova and Rebecca Davis. Sal is a moron. He's been really mean to me and my friends like Mike. Sal attacks the software I use to teach, Avita. He also claims to have history opposing my teaching mentor, Rob Pennock, but Rob has no idea who this loser is. Rebecca is a raggedy bitch who doesn't know anything about science. Unfortunately, she sought after Sal's mentorship, and he's made her even dumber. I really wish they'd both go away. There is no God. All right, let's see what it does with it. I just need something to make up everybody can relate to. Oh, man. The statement expresses a strong negative sentiment towards Sal Cordova and Rebecca Davis, citing specific reasons for the dislike. The speaker believes Sal is a moron who has been unkind to the speaker and their friends and has criticized the software the speaker uses to teach called the Vita. Sal also claims to have a history of opposing the speaker's teaching mentor, Rob Pennock, but the speaker knows that Rob has no knowledge of Sal. The speaker views Rebecca as someone who lacks knowledge in science and has become even more ignorant due to Sal's influence. The speaker would prefer if both Sal and Rebecca were not around. The last sentence appears to be an unrelated statement, expressing a lack of belief in God. Oh, my goodness. So why did it do that whole speaker thing? It's never done that to me before. Oh, you know what? Because I normally don't write in first person. Oh, that is very interesting. It did do a great job analyzing the conversation, though.
I mean, the thing for me, like, this is what I expected to be able to do. What you just did, it just pulls things out, rephrases it. The thing for me that it's doing that I think is interesting is the ability. Some of those exchanges that I had with it, it's doing inference. I mean, the thing is, it's been shown that the models are capable of doing inference,
Right.
Which is it can construct new facts based off of things that it knows, right? So it's not just an encyclopedia that looks things up. It's an encyclopedia that can take two facts that it has and on the fly combine them to create a new fact.
Yes. All right. Let me just read this.
Oh,
I was going to read. Go ahead.
Processing, regardless of your algorithm, the question is it actually thinking? Is it, is it thinking in every way that matters? It's sort of like the question of free will. Do we have free will? Well, if you talk to Daniel Dennett, we have free will in every way that matters.
Yeah.
Right. Are we actually free to make the next decision? Maybe not. But nothing is restricting the processing of our brains to come up with what we want to do.
Yeah.
Right? So it may be that, like, what we're going to do is what we're going to do, but there's no predetermining it.
Sure. Actually, I got to get out of here. Let me make sure I'm on time for my meeting, Cliff. But yeah, that was fun. And yeah, give it a shot, gang, and let's stay in touch about what people are using it for. It's certainly freaking interesting. Cliff, thanks so much for doing this. And I'm still writing my proposal, so I'd say same time next week, right?
Sure. There was just another call from a bunch of experts saying we have to put the kibosh on this thing. We got to halt it. It's getting too smart.
Really? Yeah. And also they're coming into games, right? Gran Turismo recently just came up with a bot
make them good.
That's like better AI for racing and all of this stuff. So yeah, this is happening.
Evidently, ChatGPT 4, somebody hooked it up to a camera, took a picture of what's in their fridge. It identifies the ingredients, and then ChatGPT recommends recipes.
Yes, that's crazy. All right, y'all. The bots are taking over. We'll see you next time. Poof.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights when they been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the house not a home. Sunshine cause she heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win. Now I'm got it, you ain't answering my call. Wonder if I've been moving too strong. Maybe I just been moving too boss. Really hate when the feeling get lost. Nowadays she just dodge my calls. In the game throwing laws like Paul. Young legend Miss John like Wall. And I wish you never met like Call. Thick game lay it down like Law. Made plans but you canceled them all. I was just trying to splurge in the mall. Now I'm home stacking bread till you call. It's time to roll. She tryna slide. We smoking Zah. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my